Can you guys hear me back? A little static in here and a little feedback. Is it okay? A little on the water? Try to see how it works. Hello? 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 Can you guys hear me? No? No. Like yelling? Hello? 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 Can you guys hear in the back? Yeah, that one sound a little bit better. It's going to sound a little bit like it's underwater, but can you hear it? Yeah. Okay. So that one is good. This one works. So. Test. Just gotta wait for it to actually pop up on the.
So let's check the other ones. Yeah. Sweet.
Test. All right. Hello. Did you turn off? I didn't. Hello. Can you guys hear me in the back? Good. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you everybody for coming tonight. No, you can hear me? Yeah. I can hear me. All right. So thanks everybody for coming today. I said this already, but I'm proud of this crowd and for everybody coming here. This is the biggest crowd we have. We started this about a year ago, and we hope you keep coming because that means we are doing a good job. Let me take up my notes. So, my name is Fernando Flores. I'm head of strategic partnerships at Making Sense. Making Sense is a software development company with a strong focus on user experience. So we're always trying to figure out the best way to please our users and they can find a way to do whatever they want to do with our products. We help companies here in the Bay Area, but all over the United States. And our development centers are in Mexico and Argentina. That's where I come from. That's where my accent comes from. So, like I said, we have these events about every 2 months. So maybe you came to one of our events here at General Assembly, which I want to really thank for their help. They put everything for us here for free, which is very important. And they're always helpful, so I want to give a round of applause for the General Assembly team that's over there. So we'll get it started right away, but some housekeeping notes. Bathroom, which is important. For men, over here, ladies is down the hall. If you want to go. And then Wi-Fi is over here. It's GA guest, and the password is yellow pencil. If you want to do it. And then we are starting, because of the great response we've had with the last couple of meetups, we are starting a LinkedIn group where we'll be posting the recap of the event, some of the pictures where you can find yourself, and also some other interesting stuff. So we'll probably be sending that invitation to the group later, but if you want to join now, this UX professionals in Silicon Valley. And also, now that I'm talking about LinkedIn, I think that we can do something that is pretty cool, that it's connecting you guys with each other. And you can if you have installed the LinkedIn app, you can go to connections and find nearby. You can connect that on, and you'll find everybody here that is on and nearby, and you can connect with each other. That's one of the reasons that we do this, to connect people. So I hope you get something out of it. All right. So now let's get started with the panel. We had an amazing panel tonight, and I hope you are as excited as I am. So, I will go with a quick round of introductions. We have, as you know, great brands, great professionals here, which we want you to take full advantage of. So feel free to think of questions that we'll answer in the last 15, 20 minutes, and then probably you'll want to approach them as it always happens. So feel free, they are real, they're here, so take advantage of them. So I don't want to take too much time. So maybe we can get started with self-introduction. Maybe we will go this way.
My introduction. Can you guys hear me? Hi, I'm Sri. I'm a design lead at Uber. And thank you, Fernando, and Making Sense and General Assembly for having us. I lead the inclusive design and accessibility team at Uber, which is a new team, and we've been doing this for the past couple of months. I'm happy to be here.
Good evening, I'm Pamela Bailey, and I am a product design manager at Facebook. I currently lead a team who is designing experiences for internal employees so that we can create human-to-human connections with our customers. And I am super excited to be able to hang out with people who love talking about user experience. It is a wonderful opportunity for us to just totally geek out, and so I hope that you're planning your questions.
That's not at all scary. My name is Stacey All. My title is Customer Champion. I work at Walmart, and my job is really to make sure that we're keeping the customer at the center of everything that we're doing. And while that sounds like a small task, when you think about Walmart having 160 million people coming in the store every month and 4,000 stores, it is a big gargantuan effort to think about how do we serve that customer better. And I'm also excited to be here and nerd out with all of you on this.
Hi everybody, I wish to champion my title. And I'm Tomasi. My accent is slightly different, it's come from Italy. And I lead a design studio in Switzerland. We are around 130 designers. And what we do, we work mostly with large enterprises and bank, insurance, and media.
All right, thank you guys for being here again. And let's get started with an easy one. We want to know, how was your first contact with the user experience, Jill? And if you did, when did you decide it was the career you want to pursue?
Should I go first? Yeah, sure. It's a long story, but I'll try to give you an overview. I actually trained in engineering like most other AV kids, and one of my first jobs was in a motorcycle factory. And what I was doing was sitting at a computer and trying to optimize one part of the motorcycle. And from the window, I could actually see the workers assembling those motorcycles, and none of them could actually afford the motorcycles. And that made me question what I'm doing, and I still wanted to design, but I wanted it to be more accessible, whatever I was designing, to more number of people, and that's how I discovered the internet. And yeah, that's how I came into contact with design. And UX sort of happened again as a bifurcation. I started my career in industrial design actually. And again, I started to realize that what I really cared about was how soon I could actually have impact. And that's what led me to UX. I went to school at Georgia Tech. They have a really nice school which allows you to pick and choose courses from all across the university and make up your own program. And that really allowed me to get in touch with computer scientists, biomedical engineers, business people. And I realized that design could actually tie all of those things together. So that's the short story.
I actually didn't expect to be a user experience professional because when I went to university, that really wasn't a thing because I'm old. I actually expected to be a fashion designer. And so I grew up in Canada in a little big city called Edmonton. So, oh, by the way, go Raptors. And so surprisingly enough, as I graduated, there wasn't a huge demand for fashion designers in Edmonton. But what there was a big demand for were people who think like designers. And so I started with a small software company and essentially organically developed my ability to leverage those skills as a fashion designer into the digital space. And that was the beginning of my journey.
I'm going to continue the theme of oops, I didn't mean to become a UX designer. So I started out in the arts. I have undergraduate degrees in art history and business, and I worked at a very small contemporary art center and got the opportunity to be the exhibit designer. And what I didn't realize I was doing was when I'm trying to create an exhibit that has a flow through contemporary art, through things that people oftentimes have a hard time understanding, and trying to think about the conversation you need to have, the way you need to guide people through that so they can build their understanding and knowledge. That is sort of my beginning into design. And then when my brother graduated law school and I couldn't pay for my plane ticket and I had to stay in my parents' hotel room, then I found the Masters of HCI program at CMU and sort of changed my trajectory at that point. But I didn't realize all of that exhibit design thinking really led me in this direction.
My approach to user experience is actually user experience approach me. I come from the old digital agency, and when we start working with websites and developing application, there was no kind of UX at the time. UX, what it looks now, is an assemble of different disciplines that now seamlessly work to define other experience. So I kind of learned over the year progressively, piece by piece, but mostly what it really changed my attitude was when we integrated research into the development application. And of course, research gave us a full perspective on the users, and that had we could see the immediate impact on the software and the interface design. And so that's how it began. How did this start? I don't know.
All right. So let's try to keep it very short. No complaints. But in a sentence, let's try at least. What do you look for in a UXer when hiring or working on a team together? What's, in your opinion, important for a UXer to have? It could be skill, it could be personality.
I really think the thing that I look in, when I'm looking at work, first of all, I really need to look at people's work, and what I'm looking for is a really critical way of looking at something. I want that intent and that point of view to come across, followed by the craft and the skill with which they're able to communicate their ideas and their project.
So I'm gonna have to plus on that in terms of the craft and the skill is just absolutely critical, but when it comes to a very important trait that I both look for in terms of my teammates and anyone I hire, it's intense curiosity. The idea that there always might be something around the corner, the curiosity to learn why something is or why it is not. And so it's that curiosity that should be insatiable that I look for.
+1, I look for somebody who is scrappy. I think being a designer means that you have to continue to pick yourself back up when something didn't work out and take another run at the problem. And so someone who doesn't get knocked back and down and can get back up again, I think that's important.
My take is more on skills, and what I really like when I work with a designer is someone that maybe is proficient only in some other design domain. Working with a visual designer that can understand interaction, working with an action that understand research. Those are the people that I really like because projects, features are not always linear. It's not as simple as giving simple tasks. And this way, when you're proficient in more than one skills, you are also always giving me the project the extra bit that might make the difference between us or a competitor.
Great.
Not exactly sentence, but
Yeah, no, you guys did great. So here, let's move that to from an individual perspective to a company, right? And it said that culture is strategy for breakfast. Is that right? So in your roles at your companies and also working for other companies as a consultant, in your case, Peter, how do you see your role at building a user-centered culture? And how do you make sure that that goes across the company and above, right? So I'll try to put some names on the questions. And here, Pamela, you bring experience working at companies like Capital One, Intuit, Facebook. Can you give us some thoughts on how you approach that at some of those companies, or maybe in general?
Yeah, so I think that the first thing I like to assess when I think about going in and having an impact as a user experience professional is really to understand the user experience maturity of the organization. To understand, do they think about design and creating products as making something pretty? Or do they think about design, big D design, as being a strategic pillar? And so depending on where an organization is at, then I think it's all about education. And it's all about applying the work that I do and setting up a team to be successful in order to educate those around us. Because at the end of the day, user experience is a team sport. And so I think that I will coach team members on one big thing, and that is assume no ill intent. Assume that the people that you're working with are not there to get in your way, but they just may not know how to leverage you well. They simply may not understand the superpowers that you have, and that means that you need to reveal them to them. And so from there, I think it's all about leveraging design superpowers. The first one is making things tangible. If you have a conceptual direction that you think that the organization could be moving towards, make it feel real. The second one is to show versus tell. If you think about the opportunity to bring something to life, to show through data or a skit or sketch storming, bring something to life, and then involve others in order to make them feel what the possibilities are. And then I think the third one is really simply trying to be tenacious in terms of continuously using your design superpowers and going after and involving others in the design process in order to ensure that they understand that design is not about a designer, it's about trying to transform collectively.
Great. And can you guys tell me or have an opinion on how to get sometimes to the decision makers at the companies? You know, because sometimes it's not your team or your colleagues that don't see it, but sometimes it's people above you. How do you manage those challenges? Stacey, do you have some thoughts?
I think that it's just to tag on to what Pamela was saying, it's being able to show the reality of your customers and show them either using successfully or struggling with what you've made is a powerful tool. And whether it's at a startup and sort of setting up observation sessions, just watch and learn how people behave, taking people out in the field of watching them shop or watching them prepare for what they're going to do and the reality of their lives, I think is having and recording them and playing them back or taking them out into the field with you, I think is an incredibly strong way to get them to understand, and then they become your advocates for the change you want to create. So I think that just going to your customer.
And is there, do you want to say?
Yeah, go.
He doesn't have a microphone, so I don't know.
I want to add something because I come from the consultancy part, so I have to jump in companies that ask me, I need to talk digitally to my consumer. What do I do? And so yes, I not second more what you guys said, and is extremely important. But most often my role personally is to connect to executives or that are in business, in product and engineering. A part of the company that Europe is a little bit older, and normally companies there don't really understand how you deliver an experience. So what we use three basically three main tools. One is Absolute Education, made of we design specific classes, and what we teach, even though it sounds for you maybe that you are here in San Francisco, the Valley, something very light, but we have specifically three disciplines that are important, which is design thinking, a lean approach, and agile methodologies. That normally old companies or traditional companies don't really have too much professional. And then a lot of workshop, internal workshop. And finally, we try to co-design with them. That's one of the tricks we use to involve, especially with executive. When you say, how do you get the decision made? We involve them. I don't want to say, but we did so many workshops that were, from the design point of view, absolutely useless, only to have more culture about design.
Can I quickly add?
Yeah, sure.
I think one of the other things that I've noticed is, especially in smaller teams, which don't have a lot of resources, and there's not too many businesses, and there's a lot of pressure to run fast. I think one of the biggest allies you can have is data, and how you can, even as a designer, you can either speak the language of data, and you know how to use data to meet your case. I'll give you a quick example. One of the big things that designers that we learned very early on is to work with a data scientist to really understand how to frame their own problem and how to frame their own solutions using data and not just trying to convince people with visuals.
Great, thank you.
Oh, yeah, are you guys open to questions from the audience as you go through?
Do we do a session after?
We'll have
Yes,
some time at the
yes.
end, but if it's, no, but let's make
It's
it
relevant now?
interactive, yes.
So for those who are like non-technical, how would you push them to use data?
Use your soft skills. You don't actually have to know how to use data, but you need to be able to, make friends with someone who knows how to use data, right? And it's as simple as that. You need to find people who, if you look around, there's always people who are interested in design as much as you are interested in what they're doing, and you need to figure out how to make friends with them. The other part is not asking for too much, asking for a little bit at a time. Sometimes if you ask for a lot of data at once, nobody has time for that. They have other things going on. So trying to do this as a side project, trying to find, itsy moments of time and starting to nibble away at the problem. Yeah. I think that answers your question.
I'm gonna add something that was happened to me, so personal experience. I am no absolutely technical person, but the data came to me when I want to figure out. I have an idea for my consumer, and I believe that my user is gonna be happy if I do that feature. How do I substantiate that feature? Everything about design is not a soft skill. It's data-based. So when you have a question, you have to find the answer. You go to the company, you go to the guys that have analytics of data, and you validate your idea with data. So if you don't know where to start, you start with the answers you want for your idea. You have an idea, how do I make it real? And the same goes for business. Sometimes when we say, oh, we have a fantastic new feature that we want our client to implement, how much does it cost? And that's unfortunately because we cannot make everything for every one of our users. It's one of the key, and that's again, it's data. You have to know how much it costs, which data can substantiate, and then.
But I think you also need to bring in some of the thick data along with the big data to make sure that you're not just taking things at face value, but also understanding why those patterns are happening. So as design professionals, you can also go out and really observe the reality of what customers are doing or watch them use something so you can then add another lens, and that's an offer you can make to the data scientist, is to say, and that's what I did at Yahoo when I was working on the first homepage that Marissa Mayer released at Yahoo. Was I was running ahead of when they could gather analytics and saying, okay, these are the patterns, this is how people think about this. And when it came time to actually do our A/B testing, I was like, these are the shapes you need to look at, and here's why that happened. And then that person can take that language and not include you in the meeting and tell the CEO why these things are happening.
Interesting. All right, let's leave it there. So we talk about one challenge, which is speaking up and ensuring that the UX flow is shared across the company. And I'd like to talk about some specific challenges that you guys have in your current positions. And Stacy, for you currently at Walmart, you have a very large retail physical world to play with and to bring into the digital. And how does, you were coming from Yahoo, for example, which was purely digital. How was that challenge for you professionally, and what thoughts and learnings do you take from that?
It's actually a really fun challenge because the way that the lens that we sort of bring to that is trying to understand the total scope of what someone is trying to do, understanding their goals, because people aren't just shopping online or in the store, they're doing all kinds of things. And when you have such a complex system of touch points, it's really trying to understand when are they making choices to do this type of thing versus that type of thing. And so one of the great things that's happening right now is we're using customer journeys and really looking at the data, both big and thick, to say these are the patterns that are happening, and what's the difference between someone who's making a quick run to the store because their child is sick and they need chicken soup, saltines, and Theraflu, versus someone who's doing their grocery shopping on a weekly basis versus someone who's buying a giant television. Those things are inherently different, and they're going to engage with all of those touch points in a different way. So it's really understanding that lens and using that to draw teams together, because it's not just one team that's solving that problem, but it's everyone working together to make sure that customer shopping experience is as seamless and fluid as possible. That's the end game. It's not easy because it is a massive company. It is Fortune 1, and that's sort of mind-boggling, but using that as the language to talk about what we're trying to accomplish is the way we try to create that power.
And do you use a lot of data from the physical stores to make decisions on the digital?
We absolutely have to pull that together, and there's actually someone in the back here who works on one of the products that actually takes that understanding of what are they doing when they walk in that store, and making sure that their phone can be the guide or have the right tool in their hand at the right moment when they need to check a price or they want to check out. How do we know what the right thing to do is at that moment? But also help them prepare for them going to the store. How do they know where that product is in the store, if it is even there? So we absolutely have to understand, because that is the larger part of what we do, is serve people in a store. 90% of the US population lives within 10 miles of a Walmart. Boom. So we have to pay attention to that and use that to feed.
And this idea of crunching data and getting insights out of it, how did Walmart evolve into that, having how many years in the market? Like, many. Let's say like a lot.
When is the first store? 1972, something.
So it's a.
But
it's
only
all-
more recently coming
Yeah.
into the digital space, and I think that is, they can see and understand patterns so that they knew they had to get in there. They didn't always, any company doesn't make always the right choices when they enter a new space. When you know how a store works, it's very different than how an online store should work, and how you're managing all of that. It's a constant learning process, but I think, when you look at the company values and it's about keeping the customer at the center of what you do is one of the most important ones. It's a constant evolution, it's a conversation on a regular basis, making friends with the people who are running the stores to say, this is what we think is important, showing them, rather than telling them what's going on. You constantly work at it. It's not ever like, oh, we're done. Great, everything's gonna be perfect. But Walmart is continually trying to push that edge and trying to figure out how do we do better.
Great. Thank you, Stacy.
Yeah.
So I'll take Uber next. So Uber has an extensive customer base all over the world, right? And in your position, you're trying to make that or bring Uber to people that may not fit in the standard. Is that right?
Yeah.
So how do you make decisions, design decisions, user experience decisions with that massive customer base?
Yeah, so I think part of this answer is actually cultural. The way Uber grew was always, when people think of Uber, people think about a big company sitting in San Francisco and making all of these moves. But actually, the way Uber grew was Uber recruited people in each of those cities that they wanted to expand, and literally, even now, each of those cities is run by a person who's either close to the city or is from the city. So they are entrepreneurs themselves, and in a way, we are serving them and things that they want to see in their own city. So it's a very decentralized way in which Uber has operated, and that has its pros and cons. For design, what that means is that we actually talk more with the people who are on the ground, our operations teams, and we try to understand what problems that they're facing. So that's one way of actually understanding what we should be building. And the second part is actually something that we call designing out in the open. We feel that we have the opposite challenge of what Walmart has. Walmart is trying to bring the physical into the digital, and we're trying to bring the digital and affect the physical side of things. So we call this, the design doesn't end at the edges of the screen. It extends far beyond. So we do something called street sprints. We do something called immersion trips. So designers are going out into the field and actually prototyping in real world instead of sitting inside and at your computer and trying to perfect your design. And the more we do it, the more we start to realize, the more iteration that we do in that way, we start to realize how many of our own assumptions don't actually stick and they don't work anymore on the ground. So that's something that's sort of woven in the design culture, and every new designer sort of comes into Uber has, that's a part of the learning curve is if you're at Facebook or Google or any of these other places, you can actually do a pretty good job by staying indoors, but our design most of the design, actually 75% actually happens outdoors. So getting used to that, I think that's how we try to do it. It's not perfect. We make a fair share of mistakes, but we try to iterate. I think that's the biggest thing we try to do is create short loops, short spurts of making something, testing it out in the work, and coming back and trying to perfect it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's that. Recently, we happened to study and research for a mobile checkout system at a global level for a fashion brand. And yes, basically we had to dispatch research teams all over the world because every single, the major countries were selling, but dispersed between South America and Asia and Europe. And we also, this is important, that we're connecting to a local, because connecting not only to the research and information that you can gather, but how the local would integrate the culture, the habits, and that makes the experience that you can design for them a real one.
Well, you guys actually went over my next question. But that's great. Because we're talking diversity as part of it. So we're talking multicultural users. And that's something that I think it's key for the end result, right, of your work as users. And I think that you're the link between, as Stacey was saying, you need to be in your customer's mind and bring that to the company. How do you approach that? And I'd like to hear about how do you build teams thinking about that diversity in your user base. That's, I don't know, yeah, well,
Okay, I can start.
Okay,
Okay.
go, you first.
I think we can all.
Yes,
Yeah, again, I think one of the biggest things when we think about inclusion and inclusive design, and we've been thinking about that a lot, and the first thing that we really think about is what we call starting from the edges. One of the biggest, I think, blind spots typically teams have is they're designing with an average person in mind or a particular demographic in mind. And that usually, if you think about your users as sort of like a bell curve or any sort of curve, you start to think about the early adopters, the young people, the disposable people with the disposable income. And we're trying to push the boundaries of that and actually saying that if you look at people who are not addressed first and you solve for them, you actually end up solving for a whole lot of other people. And depending on what problem you're trying to solve, the people on the edges could be different. In some cases, it could be women. In some cases, it could be racial, ethnic groups. It could be people with different socioeconomic backgrounds. So if you start thinking about those groups first and try to understand the problem, you're literally solving the most extreme problems first. And in the end, you end up making the tech stack more robust for everybody. So one of the examples that we sort of jump off of at Uber is cash payments. When Uber started, we solved for people with credit cards, people with great internet connectivity. We solved for people who were, not that they would be able to pay more money if, today or during the day. But as we started to grow, we started to realize that that's actually not true. Those assumptions don't hold true everywhere in the world. And so one of the ideas that actually came from one of the cities was, how come I can't pay cash? I don't have a credit card, or I don't feel comfortable giving my credit card to someone. So I want to pay with cash. And the entire company was against it. But again, going back to this idea that we let local teams own those features. We let people who face those problems solve those problems for themselves. And they really created an end-to-end prototype, and they convinced the CEO to actually go ahead with it. And now, I think majority of the trips that happen on Uber are actually through with cash. And it started with one city, one small team, and now majority of business that actually happens with cash. So that's one of the examples.
What you're describing is also the kind of customer that we're designing for as well. People who are underbanked or unbanked, people who need us to make sure they can actually feed their family and pay their phone bill. Thinking about what that's like. We who sit in this city are very fortunate in what we have, but when we look at the customers who are our targets and we want to go out and really understand the choices they're making on a weekly basis, on a daily basis, and bringing that story back in so that we're understanding this is how I have to plan to go to the store. I have to keep my phone out and keep track of what is in my cart so that when I get to checkout, I don't have to put something back in front of a bunch of other people. How do you help somebody prepare for that so you don't create embarrassment and you let them feel like they're in charge and smart about what they're doing? Being aware of that kind of person is who you're making something for, and it will actually make a difference in their life is kind of a powerful thought.
I want to add about we call it the extreme personas technique, the one that you were mentioning, and we had to heavily rely on one. We currently work for the largest utility company in the world, and this is on oil and gas. And by law, most of these energy companies, they have to provide service to the 100% of the population. They cannot choose, they can choose. And I didn't know, but I work on the Italian side of the project, and 7% of Italians are illiterate. So how can you design a software for an illiterate person? And that was the extreme persona you were mentioning. We cannot go for the sweet spot of the early adopter, highly technical. And of course there are ways, but yes, keeping in mind the edges, the extreme that you have to face sometimes is the most important part. For example, utility companies given by law.
I wanted to just add 2 points. The first one being, when it comes to teams, I think that the importance of hiring diverse teams is critical, because then you bring that diverse thought. You bring people who are going to have different lenses, different ways to approach the problem. They'll have different cultural experiences, different levels of education, different languages. And so ultimately then they make your product development cycle more robust. The second thing I wanted to highlight is that the number one barrier I've heard of before when trying to go global or how do you create really meaningful global experiences is that, but how will it scale? And so I think that another lens to think about in terms of having conversations about creating really rich experiences for all people around the world with all abilities is how to think about, well, what is very common? Because there will be things that are incredibly common, but what is purposefully unique? And purposely unique and purposely important. And so when I worked with Intuit and we were taking QuickBooks around the world, we had a saying that said, we need to build global, but field local. And so for every market that we were going in, we were working in hiring local people and making sure that we got a deep understanding of what the most critical things were to build specifically for that market. So for example, in the UK, we needed to get sales tax or VAT right, because it had extreme consequences to the point of shutting businesses down if they misfiled. So when you find those things that are really, really important, then you have to do them very, very well.
So, talking about teams, how do you guys, I'm trying to mix a couple of questions because I know we have about like 10-15 more minutes. That's right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So let's talk innovation. How do you guys? I think that we've been saying that all of your research and looking at the user and bringing that to the company is very important, and especially here in Silicon Valley, innovation is key to be at the top. So how do you bring that to your team and maybe to your daily tasks? If that's right.
I'll start. Sure. So first of all, I think that innovation is a big and sexy word, but it can be really, really daunting. And so when working with teams, I like to think about innovation as being, what is a really meaningful change to make to this experience? So it could be optimization. It could be something dramatic and brand new, or it could be a sense of just making something that is currently painful completely invisible. So I think that that's the first thing, is when you talk about innovation and working with teams, it's kind of demystifying it, not making it feel like it's a marathon, but making it feel like it's right at the edge of their fingertips. I think the second thing is, and one of the challenges that we can face as designers or user experience professionals, is because we are so good at imagining a better way. We're so good at seeing just the one or two or three things that could change that would make things really all that much better. We get really excited about the new things, but it can be really hard to bring the rest of the team along. So I think about innovation as being a team sport, and really ensuring that as a team, whether it's with your engineers, your product managers, that you're going after digging into problems, falling in love with that problem and the end user together, and then solving together, and really just trying to constantly iterate in order to make that big dramatic change for that customer.
I think sometimes also it's trying to look at the problem in a slightly different way. So in one of the projects I've worked on in the past, we would do analogous experiences. We were trying to design for, how do you design for good recommendations? So we went to talk to a nutritionist, we went to talk to an executive assistant, we went to talk to the culture writer for the Chronicle, we went to talk to people who are professional recommenders and influencers, and sort of use that as a seed for how we might approach our recommendation design differently. And so sometimes it's just cracking open the opportunity to just talk to someone who's similar but not identical, that can help you really feel that problem a different way.
All right. Thank you. So now let's get to the ugly part. Let's talk about failure. So I think that this is something that as professionals we need to embrace. But maybe you can give us a hint on how you go over your failures, how you take them as a learning process, and how you get NAs after that.
I failed a lot, so I
Okay.
have a lot to say. I've been always trying to be an entrepreneur. The reason why I ended up in the Silicon Valley, because I started out as a startup, and design because I like to solve problems. I call them my masters, and I developed and founded 3 or 4 different startups that failed miserably. But I have to say that every single one of them taught me one single lesson that was very extremely precious. And once I founded a company that was supposed to do tutorship for video games, for the people that doesn't play very well video games. And I learned that, unfortunately, I had a second job, because this one I knew it wasn't exactly the first source of income. And I didn't devote myself 100%. And if you are not, if you don't have anyone that is breathe and live that single problem every day, was a very important lesson to me. From then on, if I invest in a company or decide to do a company, I need to have somebody that I trust or somebody that I believe in that needs to do it 100%. And this is one of the examples. The other 3 examples were obvious, so I'm not going to say. But one lesson from every single failure.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about failures. Yeah, I think it also depends on. Sometimes I think we take. First of all, I think failures are just disappointing to everybody. But I think. What I really like about what Petra said was, it depends on if you're in it with someone else, right? If they start to feel less and less personal and less crushing if you are doing this with a group of people. And sometimes it's just a question of finding those people and trying to do this together with them. And that just makes so much difference. And personally, I don't think, especially in design, in the work that we do, that really also helps you catch a lot of things before they fail. The more people you share your work with, the more people you involve and try to get opinions. It's as simple as sometimes just getting up from your desk and taking your laptop or your phone or whatever you have, a piece of paper with a scribble on it, and showing it to another person who might appreciate it, right? And suddenly they catch something that you didn't catch, and so you just eliminated one way that you could have failed. So going back to what Pamela said about it being a team sport, I think that really helps. The longer you sit by yourself and try to solve it in your own head, the harder it is, and the more you talk to people and you try to get other people's opinions, the less you will fail. And even if you fail, it won't be as bad.
Well, I think because this is an iterative profession, it's like you just have to kind of get used to that feeling of, I didn't do it right. In fact, you never do it right the first time, so you have to expect to fail at least one time, but probably 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and it's more about how do you learn that lesson and take it forward, and what about this, and what about this, what about we look at it this way, and just keep rolling. As long as you know you're solving a real problem, I think that you just have to embrace it and go forward because it is your best teacher.
Designers are supposed to be optimistic.
Oh, there you go.
I just wanna, echo the whole failure is an amazing teacher. And I have a very long failure story, so if you wanna talk to me later, I'll be over there with a beer crying. It still stinks, but yeah, exactly. I'm gonna give you the very short version, is that, years ago, we made a very obvious mistake when deprecating a feature, in that we looked at the straight up quant data, and it looked like it was going to be fine. Nobody's going to miss this. We didn't truly understand how people were using that feature, and so we killed it, and it literally, I thought I was going to die. It was such a brutal experience going through and going to the team and going back and having to redesign something and having to get in under the covers in order to really understand why that was an important feature in the first place, and then how to bring it back and do it in an elegant way. So I think that the biggest thing, there were two big learning things from that moment, is that data is your friend, and the combination of qual and quant is a beautiful thing, beautiful. And then secondly, I learned so much as a leader in terms of how to rally a team around a mistake that we had collectively made and not feel embarrassed about it and just go after it and tackle the next thing. And then as a leader, I learned how to shield, right? You gotta shield your team. So failure is a great teacher.
Great, thank you. Don't cry, because we will look back for the event.
It's an excuse for another year.
All right, so I have one more question because I want to give the audience the chance to bring theirs, which I'm sure they're going to be much better than mine. So this is for all of you, and it's what's the best advice you can provide someone, maybe many of the people here, that are looking to break into the UX field, and they're just brand new?
This one is tough.
Wow, the best advice. Advice or the best advice?
Any advice, I think it's going to be appreciated, right?
I can say something. I honestly thought about this answer a lot, and I don't have any real answer. One thing that I know, and I think is a good advice that I give to my team, that I hope that when we work together always happen, is constantly look around and try to update and upgrade yourself. Curiosity, as you mentioned before, is a trait. Looking always what the next thing is. Next thing, good Italian accent. Next thing is maybe a very good advice to improve yourself, because like while updating your skills, you also get the better of it, and you can move forward.
I think my best advice is learn how to tell a good story. I think that design is a conversation between a company and their customers, and so learning how to tell a story to your customer, but it also benefits you in learning how to tell the story to the product person you want to embrace this, to the engineer you want to code this, to the executive that you need to approve it. It's telling that story in a crisp way, but in a compelling way. I think is a really powerful skill.
Piece of advice that I would give is know what you're really passionate about and really, really good at. So for me, I am super, super terrible at all of the tiny, tiny executional details. Super terrible. So sometimes you know what you're really good at by knowing what you're terrible at. And so, and I am great at kickstarting. I'm great at kickstarting an idea, catalyzing. I'm great at essentially making something, inviting people in, and then giving it away. So knowing what you're good at and having conversations about how you add value to a team, I think is a really great way of breaking into UX field.
Yeah, this is a tough question. I don't know. I think UX has come a long way. So when you say how great into UX, I think by the sheer number of hours you spend on your phone, in some way you're already UXing. I think the bigger thing is, again, like knowing what's in it for you. I mean, why do you really want to do this? And really knowing your own motivations for getting into this field, and being very clear about it. And trying to find every single opportunity that will take you an inch closer to that motivation. So in a lot of ways, this is just another profession. But in a lot of ways, this gives you really an opportunity to have an outsized impact. So find what you are looking for inside UX. I don't think there's any single way. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here for sure. And just try to find what you're looking for. Some people want to do UX because they really want to develop their craft, and they're really interested in leveraging technology. Some people are really interested in giving rise to new ideas, and some people are just interested because some pay the bills, get a job and keep a job, right? So find your own motivation. There's no wrong motivation as long as you're not harming users. In the end, like whatever we do is people are depending on it, and that's the challenge, is to keep satisfying your own motivation, but at the same time not doing bad in the work. Right? So I think that's the challenge.
All right, so we'll open up for questions, and Natalia is helping me with the microphone over there.
Hi, my name is Calvin, and my question is, how does the role of UX and sort of the priorities and goals change when you're in an early stage, say start a company, versus when you're a company with like a lot of scale, such as like Walmart, Facebook, and Uber, and how does that change over time? What stays the same? What are some of the differences?
More than the role of the UX changes the audience of the product. In the early stage, you tend to MVP or try to validate your idea, and you can easily address, for example, the early adopter of San Francisco. And so you target one person, a small group, so you can validate the idea, get some traction, get funding. When you get to Walmart or my utility company, and you have to work with hundreds of millions of people, at that point, it's the audience that changes. UX in its core, so trying to solve a problem for the user and make it your product as usable as possible, doesn't really change that much.
I'll highlight one thing that I think has been different, and this is primarily coming from some of the people that I've hired who come in from startups, and now we're at Facebook, and that they tend to be really quite excited about the breadth of subject matter expertise that they now get to work with, and how previously they had to wear so many different hats, and that it's a relief in many cases to be able to focus on their primary discipline, whether it's product design or user research, or even data science. They just, yeah. So that's, I think, a big difference that you can see moving from startups to medium size to much larger enterprises.
So just want to add to that, another thing which is different is actually you can take much bigger bets when you're smaller, because you're literally you're challenging a big leader or a bunch of competitors, and you're trying to do different. So you can take much bigger bets when you're smaller. Once you get bigger and bigger and bigger, every single move of yours is going to be scrutinized. So you can't just change designs as and when you want to change them, because now you have a big user base.
So I'm also Canadian, so I will send in the Go Raptors. But my question is, we're all either working in digital or want to work in digital here. Where do you guys, if anywhere, find yourself going outside digital for UX inspiration, ideas? Where outside of the internet do you guys find ideas, and where do you find yourself keep going back to, like, oh wow, I keep hearing this, or I keep seeing things that inspire me to make, whether it's the back-end improvements, optimizations, or really, really physical things to the user?
Well, I'm gonna just respond viscerally, and I think when it comes to inspiration, is museums and exhibit design, or even park design, the idea of thinking about moving through physical space and the wayfinding can be a really good metaphor for thinking about creating digital wayfinding and or purpose within digital spaces.
I think what I was also talking about with finding what's analogous to what you're doing, like doing a mind map of what are the kinds of things that are similar but not digital, and going and digging into that if you're like a chef or an artist, or like we did when we talked to the nutritionist. I mean, it was just a different way to frame the problem, and it freshened up our, like, how are we asking this question? So just finding that related but not the same, I think it always recharges me.
To me, it's design is solving problems of the users, and everywhere I go, it doesn't matter if it's digital or physical, I see any process, procedure, product that I can improve. One of the examples is I have a 5-year-old kid. And as a kid, when I started going with a bicycle, I had the training wheels. And the transition to without was a mess. I still remember the screen. My kid went from the balance bike, which is a little bike without the pedals, to the bicycle without the training wheels. And the transition was 30 seconds. Yeah. So the balance bike to me is one of the best designed product I've ever seen lately. And this is the inspiration. It solved a problem that I didn't even know it was there. And thank God as a father it was very fast.
I'll plus one to that. I think the place that I find really a lot of inspiration is just everyday life. There's so much that you can notice if you become more and more aware of how people are doing things just around you and how they're behaving, and the smallest things, smallest details that people do without thinking about it. There's actually 2 good books I think you guys should look at. One is called Everyday Engineering by IDEO, and there's another one called Thoughtless Hacks. Both are by IDEO, and they're just small books, and they have a lot of pictures of everyday phenomena. You know, when you're at a bus stop and you lean against something, when you are smoking a cigarette and you are dropping ash on a particular object on something. Things that people do without even thinking. So if we can get any of our UX stuff to that level, that you can do things, and the environment will support you that way. I think that's a good thing. So yeah, everyday life.
So here and then we go there.
Hi, I am an anthropologist. My name is Darby. I'm really curious about y'all's methods. So how are you answering the questions that you're trying to answer, and how much time are you given to answer those questions?
Never enough time. I think the method depends on what the question is, and there's some people in the back who are gonna go, yeah, I've heard that like 5 million times, don't ever have to say that again. But I think obviously going out and shopping along with people, having them journal what they're doing. There are lots of ways that we can go get a piece of somebody's life that we can sort of bring back and treasure and understand a little bit. We also use comic storyboards to tell concept stories. Obviously, we do like 50,000 flavors of usability study, but it's really creative new hybrid ways of also going out and getting inside somebody's life and walking in their shoes. I just sort of ran through your head. What else you got?
So I would second all the methods. You use the methods that are gonna help you understand. And I think the thing that I see as being most valuable when you are going and collecting and learning and observing is, I'm just gonna say it again, when you bring your team along with you and you actually help or train, air quotes, that you invite your engineering partners and your product managers to collect the data with you. They may not have the skill set to synthesize it. The act of collecting the data and being part of that real kinetic experience with that customer is gonna be just really mind-blowing. So all the methods, yeah, sure.
But there's never enough time. That's always the argument. It's like, well, why do you need this long to do this? And so again, it's sort of like, how do you make the case and how do you align it and strategize for how you're gonna connect the dots with these methods and what you're gonna be able to deliver. Sorry. I saw the sign language.
No, I just want to have all the questions answered. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Hi, thank you guys for coming out. My question is, how do you balance, like pressure from your corporation perhaps, to like drive profits and maybe use dark patterns with like the obligation that you have as a designer to like serve your users?
My job. The game usually is with engineering and product or business. Product and business defend the money, technology defend the ability to provide the solution, and you advocate for the user. When you grow in your career, when you do lots of project work, many years in a company, that kind of balance depends on how important it is. Coming as a consultant in a company, we came out with specific workshop dedicated to prioritize. And at one point, you have to put on a whiteboard or in a workshop, it needs to come out the priority, how much important, and this is data-driven KPIs, is for the user. How much does it cost? It comes from product, and how long it's gonna take, and then comes from engineering. And then you balance it. This is a science at one point. It starts with a feeling that we want a feature, or the product wants more money. But in the end, you have a science to exactly extract that balance.
I think it's also bringing it back to what is the customer problem we're solving, because innovation for innovation's sake doesn't really help you as a company hit a goal or hit a revenue target. So if you're not actually solving a real customer problem, I think that's the dot that needs to be connected to the other dot. And that's a leverage point for you.
I'll just pile on in terms of, I think when you have teams who own their product experiences and are responsible for setting their own targets and the impact that they are aiming to make, then they're going to go after that. They're going after trying to solve that problem. And so then you don't have that kind of tops-down kind of approach that is about bottom line or top line, those kind of conversations.
I think one more thing is just, I think I see a lot of designers, especially now, being so focused and being driven by business impact. I think it is so tangible, and if someone shows you dollars on the side and they're like, oh yeah, we have to go after that, and everybody's like, yeah, we have to go after that. I almost feel like it's more important now for designers to be able to resist that and being able to frame arguments against it. And one of the things that you need to do is to understand if you actually have a blind spot or the team has a blind spot that they're not looking at in pursuit of the money. And so one of the frameworks that we've been trying out in design discussions is the triple bottom line. So it's not just about the regular bottom line is how much money you can make.
Yeah.
Triple is can you make money? Great, but can you create positive social change on top of that? And on top of that, can you actually make people happier about what they're doing? So we're trying to introduce that into conversations and having those tough conversations with business partners especially, and seeing, can we not just do the dollars alone? Can we do just more than just that? And therefore, to answer your question, not just do dark patterns for the sake of making money.
Here we have
Hi, my name is Andrew. I guess my question is that is there a time that you have a conflict with your either manager or a lead? I know some of you guys are lead already. How do you guys handle it? Were you guys compromise or did you persuade them in a certain way?
I think so. Conflicts are usually the way I see conflicts. It's usually because someone is missing the other person's perspective. I think that's what usually happens. And as a designer, your job is to always persuade, learn to persuade, and to find and be able to frame arguments, right? And be able to frame your story and tell your side of it in a good way. So one of the ways you can actually do that is to actually prepare yourself before you have that meeting around the conflict that you're having, right? Spend some time actually writing down thoughts that you have and clarify those things for yourself before you go out and have that discussion. Otherwise, the conflict is just going to grow. So I don't know if that answers your question.
I agree.
About conflicts, it's, what happens to me often when there is say two designers that has a different idea of how to solve the problem, is kind of they limited themselves about little variables. They only say, they see the problem only on one side. So my role is helping them seeing that the impact that design solution has in other variable. And this, in this case, may be variable like money, may be variable about a larger audience and not a single person. So introducing more variable to the discussion, let them design resolve automatically the balance between which solution is better. So it's not just button left, right, or the color is one of the others. But if you say which color you prefer, it's very simple. But what's the background? What's the mobile? How? I mean, you can add and add and add. What colors your competitor do? It's simple, but adding more variables will lead them always to a solution in a normal team. There's always the not normal.
Thank you guys so much for the talk. I think it was super informative. So I'm going to be working in growth this summer. I'm going to be a growth intern student right now. I think like other people here, we're not necessarily in design, but we're looking to transition into it. So the way I'm thinking about doing that is I'm thinking about incorporating design into my role as a sales and marketing intern. So I'm on the growth team, but I'm going to be doing sales and marketing type stuff. So what I'm curious to hear from you guys is if you have any thoughts about ways of applying user experience skills or user experience frameworks to the sales and marketing role to take that kind of cross-functional experience. Because in some sense it makes sales and marketing better, but in another sense it would also frame a person who's looking to transition into user experience in a good way because they've actually demonstrated those skills in a role that's not that, but does that make sense?
One.
I mean, I think design thinking skills can be applied in any of those veins to be able to sort of break down the problem and figure out what you're trying to address. So being able to sort of speak that language of facilitating the conversation, understanding what you're trying to solve and how you're going to develop solutions against that is one way you can start to craft that user's UX mindset. What else would you add?
I might suggest that you also think about, so if we think about design thinking, the core, the very first kind of pillar is empathy. And so really ensuring that either from like understanding your own role, being empathetic towards that, as well as the customer. And then, just to pile on, what's the problem you're trying to solve? How are you gonna brainstorm? How will you narrow? How will you iterate? How will you prototype? And thinking about it almost as its own project alongside your work, your regular internship.
I would say, and maybe what I can do is make it a little bit more technical. I think one of the things that I don't see typically people who are coming into UX is really being able to visualize how people feel. So, for example, a good method is a journey map, right? If you're looking at a problem in terms of just what do the people do at each point in the journey with your product, that gives you a sense of what's happening. But if you actually start to go deeper into that and start mapping out also how they feel at each step, right? Then you start to think about, okay, it's not a question of where is the most friction, but it's actually also about where is the most amount of pain, right? And that's what designers tend to do a lot, is to really look at the pain that it's causing and what it's taking away from them. Is it taking away time from people? Is it taking away money from people? Is it causing them a lot of grief just to use a product? And then taking that and suggesting some improvements. I think ownership is a big deal with design. Design is not just about analysis. You have to show a better way. So you take, maybe even if you take a piece of that and try to create a solution, no matter how good or bad or how well crafted it is, but try to make a case for it, right? With the mapping work that you've done. I think that's one of the great ways to actually jump into design. And no one's going to say no to that because they're trying to substantiate with the work that you've done.
Super helpful, thank you.
I have to write this down because I actually don't want to ask it. So at my last position in operations, I felt like I was gathering a lot of amazing qualitative insights from the customers I was working with. But we're faced with a lack of support from management, and there was no communication channels with maybe executives or the product teams. And I'm wondering if you maybe have some unconventional ways that you could get their attention to share those insights.
Oh yeah. Or I can yell. I think some of the creative ways would be just start putting posters up of things, like design those personas and put them out so that people have to confront them, is one way that I would go about it. And like taking a different frame on, I'm not just designing something, I'm not shipping you a deck, but making it real, finding a video clip or finding an example that you can't ignore, and being able to tell that really amazing story of the struggle that somebody's going through, I think is a way that, just emailing them, hey, you have to see this video of something I just observed, that might be enough just to push them over the edge, go, oh, well, maybe can you do more of that? That's a couple of ways.
Just to pile on, so I've seen it work well when you find one other like-minded person who then finds one other like-minded person, and together you're creating this narrative around the opportunity and around the pain, and you're making it feel real. Then you've got people who you're planting the seeds in multiple places, and then you're building momentum around that story. And your point, then you can't ignore it.
I would add one more thing to that, which is actually sometimes one of the biggest reasons why sometimes design doesn't get a lot of support from other functions is because designers tend to not talk about the risk involved in actually changing something, and the amount of time it takes to actually make the change. So one of the ways I've seen things working better is how you frame what you're asking them to do. You can ask them to make something new because it'll change, it'll solve the problem, or you can also put it as, hey, if I go do this, if you give me 5% of your time, you can make this small little change. It'll be hacky. It'll be it may not work at the time, but we'll go show it to some people and see if it actually works, and it'll de-risk everything else, right? And so we don't want to solve the problem, we just want to de-risk it. So I think it really helps speaking their language and understanding their pain points, because it's just sometimes it's just a matter of time and priority, right? And so the more you can weave into their priority and speak their language, that really helps. Which I think you're trying to do.
Hi, I'm Claire, Managing Director of Girls in Tech Paris in France. Thank you very much for that very inspirational talk. My question will be about data scandals, because sometimes companies are 100% compliant regarding data protection, but the end user, they feel that could be very intrusive, the way that advertising and product could go to them. I'm thinking about that very famous marketing example where vouchers for baby products were sent to a girl from high school, and his father, when he figured out, he get very mad, but at the end the store was right because they predict that his daughter was pregnant. So my question is, how do you use design thinking to prevent your organization from having those data scandals for your end users? Thank you.
Data and gathering data is first off is completely different between Europe and US. It's two completely different worlds. And even in Europe, it's different between Germany and the rest. They really are opposite. So I very much what you mean and what's the problem. What I try to do is sometimes data are a necessity in order to operate the service. And as much as I hate and I'm a privacy freak myself, I have to use data. What you can do is do it progressively. Don't ask unnecessary data when you cannot. And really feel through your research how much your clients are sensitive about it. There are some clients, some audiences, some countries that they really don't care. They are so happy about the outcome of the service that will give you their social security number. There are some countries that they have not given you their own name. And look at like what Apple just said with the sign-in. So privacy now is becoming more and more relevant. So I would say that my soft advice, my very simple solution is ask progressively the data that you need, and learn the trust of the people of your users slowly over.
Yeah, I just want to echo the do not be evil with people's data, because I think if you're asking them for things and you're not responsible for it and responsible with it, then you have breached the trust that is there. I mean, it has to be easy for people to engage with you and tell you pieces of information. You have to tell them why you need to know things, and then you have to be responsible with that information and not break the news to someone's dad that somebody is having a baby. And only in that moment can a company sort of continue that relationship and that conversation. And I think using that language of we're this is a risky proposition. Here's what the impact is of trying to send out these messages and being too clever. Because I think sometimes personalization gets too smart. And it needs to be the right level of conversation and not oversharing or asking for more than you need, just to add to it.
Well, and I would also add that, design has such a huge responsibility in terms of being very principled about ensuring that we are monitoring, understanding how data is being used, both internally within our experiences and any sort of third-party developer. And I'm fully expecting that in the next year, 18 months, that we're gonna see a really large transformation, especially largely led by design ethics, in order to both help improve people's literacy around their data trail, as well as just at the end of the day, making experiences feel safer.
I might one more. Do you guys see that coming? Well, there's been a lot of talking lately. You see that happening now at your companies, right? Is that?
I think that there's a number of companies big companies who've released large, what am I trying to say? Large publications around their data and AI ethics policies.
Yeah, it's not just like publicity or news. There is something happening inside those companies as well, right?
Absolutely. I mean, there's huge and new departments that are all being formed around ensuring that we are being very, very conscious and respectful and purposeful.
Like, and Walmart is like fierce about it, like you have to sign in blood and like promise your future children and before we turn over anything that's personal. And so it is an ethic that the company does have, but we have to continue to remind ourselves, like, when is it okay to say it, not, and how much, even just linking the credit card used in the store with the credit card used online, and we think it's helpful to go, here are all the things you bought, and some people are like, how did you know that? I didn't buy that online, why are you telling me about that? So you never know how people are gonna interpret that.
Yeah, again, I think something that that we're doing tactically within the design team is when we start thinking about our design system, we actually think about 4 things that maybe 5 that absolutely need to be the essence of, like, they're part of the foundation. One is accessibility, privacy, safety, and payments, and those are they basically form the design system, the foundation of the design system at Uber. So that means when any designer at Uber is trying to pull components and build UIs that has to do anything with any of these 4 topics, we build it in a centralized, we build a protection inside some of those components and how they can use some of those components. And that's the journey that we're on. We just started doing that because we noticed that the definition of privacy and the definition of accessibility and what people are willing to do, even inside a big company, there's so many different ways in which people interpret it. You may be something that you may be comfortable with, other people may not be comfortable with, right? And so it's up to the design leadership to actually draw the boundary and be like, this is what is absolutely the baseline, and we can't cross this baseline, or this is the minimum amount of guarantee that we can provide from a design system perspective. So that's what we're trying to do.
Great.
Here we have.
So yeah, last question, and then we'll have some more networking, and you can come and bring some more questions.
Hi, thank you for coming. My name is Shadi. I'm trying now to build persona, so hopefully, I think we have it now here in the hall, so everybody can take advantage of this. So this person is trying to break into UX design or product design. This person is learning everything online and offline. Okay, but the thing is, this person is trying to put things in action, trying to get real experience, trying to build portfolio. So at your organization, when you are hiring, how do you look at the portfolios? Do you prefer like experiences with customers? What are your thoughts about those portfolios, about the experience? Because okay, it's nice, like those kind of things, they are so beautiful for me. I love them, but the things I have hard time how to get those things in action and break into this world and have the confidence that at some point, okay, I'm gonna go apply for jobs, then I will meet people and I will be confident enough because I think I have experience now to to make impact and change and build something.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was my question.
I think one of the, I think different teams, and that's one of the things I guess most people don't realize is that when you apply to a company, depending on the team, depending on who's reviewing your application, they may place different kind of weightage to different parts of your application. So for some, portfolio might be the best thing. For the others, something else might shine. When I can speak about myself, and when I'm looking at portfolios, I'm really looking at how much of the problem are you willing to own and push for, and within the resources that you have. And I have this example, actually, it's an old example. The person who was designing the first Palm phone, walked around with a block of wood in his jeans, and kept shaving away the small pieces of the wood until it felt like the right size, right? And that didn't really cost anything, within the resources he or she had, to try to do the best of it. So within your constraints and within your own sort of context, how far are you willing to take that problem or a solution? How far are you willing to think through it? Is it for some people stop at mock-ups, some people stop at prototypes, some people go show the prototype to people and get feedback and do another round of solving. So it shows how far you're willing to invest your time into that, given the constraints, right? I think that's because that pretty much comes down. It all comes down to that. Is whatever you're going to work on is all going to depend on the environment and the people in the team.
I'll pile on to that in terms of thinking about, I always start by looking at the portfolio. And when it comes to the expression of the portfolio, I'm looking to understand and see how someone thinks and how they approach a problem and how deeply they go and what kind of decisions are being made along the way and the rationale for those decisions. But I'm also looking for something that's an end-to-end, that it feels like it's complete, that it's solved very, very well, even if it's an MVP.
I'm something that plus absolutely agree. And when you're trying to build your first portfolio, let's take our and say, how do I don't have experience, I'm not working, I still have to apply. Give yourself a problem and solve that. So yes, we do always work at portfolio. Not every team has the same portfolio, and different people look for different traits inside the portfolio. How people think is absolutely every one of the most important. And how do you see? Maybe you never worked in this specific industry. I was very impressed both on corporate side when I see big agencies that decide to revolutionize the air industry or the car industry. They make just concept, or even just young designer that wants to apply at my company to start. They maybe try to give themselves a little problem, or a problem that every day, and they solve it. And so with the solution, like we can see the whole how the guy thinks or the girl thinks, and then at the point we can evaluate, even if it doesn't have any practical experience.
And then the thing I would add to all of these great things is a little bit of self-awareness about how you looked at the problem and being able to look critically at your thinking and then say, here's what I would have done differently, or here, now that I've gotten all the way through, how do I reflect on it? Where did I make a misstep? And I think that critical assessment of your own abilities is also really helpful. Like that self-awareness is great.
I also want to add one thing. It's looking for a job and apply is iterative as well.
Yes.
So you go to an interview, try to the first 10, look at it as a learning experience. What question did they ask? How did they respond? I mean, portfolio, like resume, is a living, breathing thing. You change every time you have an interview, it changes. It needs to change. So don't look at it I did my portfolio, I send it to all the companies. What I did in my time is, I sent to 10, I get 2 interviews, I go there and I learn. And learning through rejection is the most horrible way to learn. Let's be real. Applying for jobs is probably one of the stressful and annoying things to do. But again, if you look at it, you can improve yourself, and after a while, you have a better tool to work.
All right, thank you. Thanks very much for your. We have some presents here for our panelists. This is Argentinian wine.
I'm the best present.
So we hope you enjoy it. Thank you again. And thanks everybody for coming. We'll be sharing all the recap of this. Feel free to stay here for a while. I don't know if there's some beer there.
We're so nice. Where's your man?
One, two, three. 1,